to ask all the ministers to give open remarks, I want to abuse slightly my chairman's prerogative to ask Dr. Schäuble a question about his opening presentation. Because you raised a proposal you have made before, which is as the Commission becomes more political, is there a role for another institution, perhaps the ESM as you suggested, to intervene as a more technocratic institution to police budget rules? We're at a time right now where two of the members on this stage are engaged in rather difficult negotiations on this. And you said that the ESM may, in some cases, take the place of the Commission where the Commission can't play that role. I'm curious if you can elaborate. Where do you believe the Commission may not be able to play a role as a policeman for the budget rules?
Look, in the beginning of the Euro crisis, some of us, I think including the European Commission, have been in favor of a European monetary system. We didn't get it at that time. I think we are on the way to get it. And I think we could develop the European stability mechanisms in that direction. That is my, and then we could do it something like, to make a concrete example, similar to the Article 4 consultations by the International Monetary Fund. It's not unthinkable. As I just have said, I am in favor of a political self-understanding of the Commission. The Commission must move in the direction of something, it's difficult to accept for a French auditor, but he doesn't understand English, therefore I can say in some ways the Commission must move partly in the direction of a European government, partly political. But if it is a matter for implementation rules, you need some neutral institutions. Let's look at, for example, state aid rules. They have to be implemented not by political opportunity, but by rules. And that is what we need as far as we don't have the institutions to implement our common fiscal decisions in the fiscal union. Then we wouldn't need it. And therefore we could, in the meantime, in the interim time, we could use a stability mechanism and develop in such a direction. We will have to discuss it in the months to come. I think so.
And this is something, frankly, you've argued, I remember back dating down to the Van Rompuy report back in 2010, the word automaticity rings in my ear with a German accent because you would repeat it so often. But I want to turn to another person who was involved in some of these discussions, who raised his hand, Pierre Moscovici. You are a member of a commission with the president who has declared very openly that he wanted this to be more political. There have been some criticisms that your commission, when it's been judging the Italian and French budgets, and more recently the Portuguese and Spanish budgets, has been too political. How would you respond to Dr. Schäuble's proposal that some of these duties should be taken away from the Commission and given to the ESM or another institution?
I don't want to seem to advocate too much from my home or for my portfolio, because I'm in charge precisely of budget surveillance, of economy and finance. But there I have more than a nuance with Wolfgang. And not only because I'm a commissioner, I was also, before his colleague as finance minister, before Michel, in my home country, France. First, the pact works, and nobody must suspect its results. When I look at the deficits, 2010, 6% inside the Eurozone, 2016, 2%, and next year we will deliver our forecast in a few days, under 2%. So if our budget surveillance, the way we exercise it was not effective, we would know it. Second, yes, this commission is political in the sense that it takes into account a sound economic judgment, that it takes also into account, and we've got to do that, the democratic cycles. For example, in Spain, there has not been an effective government for a year. There has been an active government, but it's not quite the same. But we are not a politicized commission. And each of the decisions we have taken in the last 2 years were first taken unanimously, and second, in the framework of the rules. Those rules, they are intelligent. They allow us to have some room of maneuver for flexibility, for investment, for structural reforms, for earthquake, and I have here a thought for what happened in Italy again a few days ago, for those countries who have to welcome refugees, and the European Council made it clear last week that it had to be taken into consideration. But no, we are not taking any kind of decision outside of the rule. Third point, and that is maybe the most important. We must discuss that, Wolfgang. It's about democracy. Some reproach the Commission to be a bureaucracy. We're not, obviously, because we are a body composed of politicians or former politicians, the way you take it. There are prime ministers, former ministers inside the Commission. But there is democratic accountability. We are a body which first delivers opinion, and finally the Council and your ministers are part of the Council, take the final decisions. And we are also responsible in front of the European Parliament. And the ESM has a lot of competence. Klaus Schreding is a wonderful manager of the ESM. But there, it's totally, I wouldn't say a bureaucracy, but a purely financial and technical body. So, no, I think this should still be in the Commission. I think that we are getting better equipped with the fact that we will have a European Fiscal Board which will advise us, and it will be established by next week and start playing its role. And finally, yes, there is a debate beyond that. It's about automaticity. Should there be flexibility or automaticity? But I think that Wolfgang was right to raise the issue. We can have different answers. The issue is legitimate. And finally, I understand better now why he does that when saying the Commission should be something like a government. I'm also favorable to that. I'm a federalist in a way like him, but also like him, I'm a realist and a pragmatic, and I know that it's not maybe for tomorrow.
Can I ask Dr. Padouan if you could weigh in on this? Because in this sort of debate between the technocratic and the political, both Prime Minister Renzi and yourself have been very loudly talking about the need to take into account, most recently, earthquake damage, things like the refugee crisis that Italy has suffered. Take these sort of more political and social issues into account when considering budget rules. I'm curious where you would come out on the spectrum between the technocratic and the political, because the rhetoric coming from Prime Minister Renzi seems to be much more on the political, that there should be a much more political process than perhaps a rules-based technocratic process.
Well, I'll leave it to you to decide where I stand in the line, but I think that we have to both improve the rules, and I'll give you an example in a second, but also take into account good politics. And what I mean by good politics is the following. We are living in times of deep political change, and at the same time we are living in times of deep political uncertainty, which is generating a continuous damage to Europe and elsewhere, because if there is major political uncertainty about the future, about the strategy of the future, things don't happen. And if things don't happen, unemployment doesn't go down, growth doesn't come back, and welfare doesn't go up, and consensus for Europe goes down. So we badly need to shed political uncertainty about the long-term strategy that Europe wants to take, which implies that you have to take into account, yes, of course, fiscal discipline, yes, of course, financial stability, but also growth in jobs, to put it very bluntly. European citizens, most of them, don't even know what a banking union is. We know when we cope with it every day. But they want jobs. They want to know whether they can count on jobs for their kids over the next 10 to 20 years. So I would very much take on board dealing with the strategy. Many of the points that Wolfgang made just earlier on a few minutes ago, like integration, like employment, like investment. We need to go back to the origins of the European strategy, which is basically about growing through more integration. And this is true for the Eurozone, this is true for the EU 27, and both are parts of one same system. Therefore, we need to inject more instruments and elements which link financial stability and fiscal discipline, which are a precondition for growth, to job creation and job security. And the Italian government has put forward a proposal to that. I will not make any publicity about it, but I'll be happy to talk about it. Let me make a point about rules. Of course, rules must be respected, but sometimes rules are clearly badly designed. And let me just give you one example everyone in this room is familiar with. This strange animal which is potential output. Potential output is something we do not observe, but we think we know through statistical methods. The fact is that according to the variation on that method that is used, you get very different results for individual countries at a given point in time. And as far as technical analysis is concerned, this is fine. It's even amusing. After all, I'm a professor from economics, and I like those things, like models. But the problem is that very practical and important decisions are made at the fiscal discipline level according to rules that may be challenged. So the point is, we need to make the institution stronger. We need to, at the same time, to have more political endorsement. And this is the point Pierre was making just a minute ago, because we have to deal with political uncertainty. Therefore, we must use our institution to shed political uncertainty. And then, if we want to make progress on the institutional, more technical side, then let's admit that some of the rules may be improved. This is not a world without rules, it's a world with better rules.
Monsieur Sapin, la même question. And let me just remind everyone that the English is in channel 2. You are also, right now, a member of a government that is suffering politically and has also made a very similar argument that at a time of political distrust of the EU, of Brussels, of rules, that a little bit more of political savvy, of more political understanding has to be applied, less in the French case, Front National, in the Italian case, Cinque Stelle, some of these populist movements gain the upper hand. Would you, on this debate, side yourself perhaps more with Dr. Padoan on this than Dr. Schäuble?
Merci pour cette question. Malheureusement, c'est une situation qui n'existe pas qu'en Italie ou en France ou dans quelques autres pays. Malheureusement, en Allemagne, il y a aussi des mouvements qui contestent l'Europe, qui contestent les règles européennes, qui contestent les disciplines qui sont par ailleurs nécessaires du point de vue européen. Et on a vu en Grande-Bretagne, qui est un pays un peu différent puisqu'il n'est pas dans l'euro, combien ces questions d'identité, ces questions de migration, ces questions avaient pesé dans le choix du peuple britannique pour voter le Brexit. Donc il y a partout en Europe une question absolument fondamentale aujourd'hui, parce que l'Europe sort tout...
Because Europe is just out of a period of economic suffering, social suffering as well, suffering when it comes to unemployment. We are just out of this period. So what is at stake is for us to make sure that people take ownership again, that they have enthusiasm again in favor of Europe. This is what is at stake for us right now from a political point of view. Now, if I am to comment your first question and also the way Wolfgang answered this question, it goes without saying we need rules, we need to respect rules, and in order for those rules to be respected, we also need to have an independent entity, independent from the Commission. I'm not making a caricature out of Wolfgang's proposal, we know it, but we also know how provocative it is, because he wants us to start reflecting, to force us to reflect and find the best solutions. It's quite a tricky question even for France, because in your question we had the feeling that maybe you were wondering naturally France might not be brought to respecting rules. Is that what you meant? Well, you know, France respected the rules in 2015, we are respecting them in 2016, we will respect them in 2017, even if there was to be a political debate. There are political debates or political elections everywhere in all the democracies, and of course France is a democratic country. Of course, in 2017, we have an election, and by nature, it can change and animate, moderate the political debate. Now, rules exist. We need to respect them. It is absolutely instrumental. But European rules, the most recent one, were created in order to be able for us to face a potential explosion of the Eurozone in 2010, 2011, 2012. This allowed us to enhance the integration of the Eurozone to actually save it. But those rules, they were set in a smart way. It means that we do have rules, but as we used to say, we also have flexibilities in the way you apply and respect those rules. If we were only to have rules, then a purely technical authority would be able to make sure those rules are being respected, just like a policeman is able to see the difference between a red light and a green light. It's easy, either it's red or it's green, and you can make sure that the rules is being respected. Now, when we talking about flexibilities between the green light and the red light, who is going to judge about those flexibilities? Where here, political representatives and the political appreciation has to intervene. We need to appreciate global situations, what is our position when it comes to the economic cycle, but also more specific positions. Let me take a few examples. The migration crisis, this is something we need to appreciate, to evaluate and assess. We need to understand the consequences on the fiscal situation, an earthquake as well. We need to make sure that we assess the consequences from an economic and social point of view. And I believe that this assessment, it owes to the Commission to carry it out. Very often when we talk about politics, it is something that is perceived as negative, as if there was some subjective aspect, some a priori. No, politics, it is assess very finely situations, and starting from there, assessing the way rules are being assessed and the way we are using the existing flexibilities.
On this question, let me go to our host as the last member. I'm a little bit devious by saving him for last, and you'll see why when I ask the question. Commissioner Moscovici mentioned Spain as a country that did quite tough structural reforms, and just recently we're going to see Prime Minister Rajoy return to office. Slovakia is also a country where Prime Minister Fico did some rather tough fiscal reforms in his first term, and very recently you were returned to office. I'm curious, having gone through the experience that you went through, if you have a slightly, perhaps a more sympathetic view towards Dr. Schäuble than perhaps our others on my end of the podium here do.
You know, this afternoon debates could be either provocative or slightly along the common lines. You decided to do it in a provocative way, and I fully agree with you, because it's also my style. But I have to stress that I fully agree with Wolfgang, and mostly we are allies, you know, on that issues, because this is just about the personalities. This is about maybe mentality. We are committed to the rules. As a small country, you know, this is normal. Once you have a rules, then you have to follow them. In my view, you know, once we are not satisfied with the rules, then we have to change them. So not just to avoid it, no, change it. And so debate to change it, this is always very difficult, but this is our right to raise it. What Pier Carlo mentioned, this, you know, debates on output gap, on structural deficit and structural efforts. I remember this more than 10 years. You know, there is a working group, and scientists are working on that. I remember Anders Borg just mentioned that he cannot explain his mother. What does it mean, the structural deficit? You know, and that's true. You know, this is very difficult issue, but we can move a little bit. But also, I would like to agree with Wolfgang that we have to be proud. We have to be proud about the Europe, because this is about like you are coming from the USA, okay? But okay, you can imagine 27 students in the room, and just to debate about where we are going for the trip. You know, it's always difficult, and for us this is not easy, but we can manage, and we have to be targeted, you know, on this success. And talk about the Slovakia, you know, we did a lot. We just more than 10 years, we are the members of European Union, and so it was our dream from the past, you know. Since 2009, we joined to the Eurozone, only country in this region. So, and it was quite a difficult exercise also for us. Also, certain big countries doubted in these times about that. But can you imagine that thanks to membership in the Eurozone, Slovakia got additional 10% of GDP growth? And this is, we can prove that, you know. So if you compare, thanks to membership to the Eurozone, just I would like to send to my Czech colleagues, you know, maybe. Thanks to people like Willy Molterer here, because as a former Vice Chancellor of Austria and Finance Minister, my colleague, you know, we were the member of this club, and we have to be proud about that, you know, and we did our best in this area, and that's also a reason why we always try to be a little bit provocative and raise the issue about how to complete the architecture of monetary union, and not just because of to get out of something of it, but because the best interest of monetary union is also the best interest of my country. But talking about the old member countries and new member countries, I still, and I think this is important, the Europe is one of the happiest places in the world. No, you know that just 12 from 20 countries are among the happiest in the world, no, and they are European. So this is the evidence. This is about the people. They think that this is a marvelous place to live. On the other side, unfortunately, Europe is also, we are spoiled a little bit, you know, because if we compare, we are too rich if we compare with the rest of the world, and we are reluctant to change something, you know, and this is about the ability to change things and to be committed to the reforms, for example.
Dr. Schäuble, let me come back to you. I think the only thing that all the panelists seem to agree on is that when the rules don't work, we need to change them, and I saw you nodding your head when Minister Kashmir mentioned that. But when you had your 6 things that Europe needs to deal with, the top 3 were not economic issues. They were migration, external relations, Ukraine, and security. How difficult is it to try to change the rules and secure the EMU at a time when all these other things are happening? I remember, as Mr. Sepin said, much of this happened during the white-hot period of the crisis. There was fiscal compact, 6-pack, 2-pack, banking union. This all happened in the period from 2010 to 2013. We've had a new 5 Presidents report. We keep talking about new reforms, and yet in 3 years, 2 years since Commissioner Moscovici has been in office, there has been real no changing in the rules. Can you change the rules? Can you try to solidify the EMU when you have all these other things going on that you listed?
I think it is not really realistic to work for an amendment to the primary law to a treaty change in the time given. So far, I agree with your question, but no one of my colleagues asked for such a change of primary laws. We can discuss, of course, how we can amend the rules in the Pact of Stability and Growth, and so that is what we are doing, by the way. But in the time given, since Europe is facing a major crisis by a lot of reasons, and the Brexit, the decision of this British people has something like a warning, a waking call or something else, because as Michel Sapin said, in a lot of member states, the part of population who is doubting in Europe is increasing. Therefore, we have to make clear, and that is the most important thing now, to show that that Europe can solve problems in a better way than any nation state or any member state can. Number one, as I mentioned, for countries like Italy and Germany, is actually the migration issue. We can do it. We are on the way to do it. We have to improve a little bit. We have to become even more better, but we are on the way. Europe is always a little bit slowly, that's true, but at the end Europe moves. I'm thinking, by the way, we are even moving in some way in the direction of to strengthen our common foreign and security policy. we are not by far not there where we have to be. Because I doubt, look, let's take a concrete example. Everyone will agree that watching what's going on in Aleppo is a shame for humanity and especially for all of us in Europe. So far we agree. But who will be ready to do what would be needed? And of course, we agree that the Russians are doing wrong things, the things are complex, and the Americans have made a lot of mistakes. That we agree also. But as soon as we start to think what could we do, we Europeans, it's difficult. Therefore, we have to become better. I doubt whether the readiness in the United States of America after election will increase compared to the last couple of years to solve the problem of stability of Mediterranean, Near and Middle East for Europe. And of course, since the Arabic Spring, Europe is no longer protected by a lot of dictatorships in this region, stable, relatively stable, but protecting us against refugees from this region. It's over. Therefore, we Europeans have to care. We have to become much more better. But having said this, even since UK is leaving, UK has always blocked any initiative toward a common security policy. So we are moving, using the instrument of the treaty in enhanced cooperation. It is not so fast as I would like it, but it's moving in that direction, and that is quite important. And if we solve these two issues, and if we can be more efficient in fighting youth unemployment in some member states, I think we will create a lot of added value in the view of our citizens, of the sovereigns. And that is the most important thing. By the way, we will, as I mentioned it, when we started the Juncker initiative, and we all was very in favor of this investment fund, 315 billion, additional investment. Do we really have additional investments? When we discussed under the presidency of Piercarlo Padoan years ago, we need more opportunities for investment all over Europe. And of course, we need more investment not in Germany in the first round, but in some other member states which have actually more economic problems. But if you look at the sheer numbers, it's the opposite. And then the Juncker initiative was accompanied by the proposal of a digital union and an energy union. Not much has happened in the meantime, and therefore we have to improve. As they said, we can do it in a more efficient way, and it's not all this blame game. It's not the Commission, or it's not the European Parliament, it's the member states, or vice versa. It doesn't work. We have to become more efficient. And last remark, with all due respect, Mr. Commissioner, I never criticize Commission in using any flexibility which is given in the treaty. It was the President of Commission, who delivered a speech in Paris in which he said publicly, and it was quoted in media, that of course the bigger member states like France have been never treated equal compared with smaller member states. And that is a philosophy which does not fit for European Union. And that was not the German finance minister.
I'll get Commissioner Boscovici, I'll get you to respond to that, but I want to just very quickly get to Dr. Padoan, since you were the sort of one who raised this issue of changing the rules and this issue of potential growth. I mean, I think you have talked about this probably since the day you first became finance minister. I remember in Brussels you talking about it quite a bit. And yet, again, as Dr. Schäuble pointed out, there is so much distracting your bosses, essentially, and particularly your boss in Italy. We have a referendum coming up in December. We have the migration crisis. We have a populist party rising. Is there the political will in Italy and in other member states to do the kinds of things that you think are necessary to change the rules, to make them more effective and more responsive when there's so much else going on right now?
Well, there are many ministers in a government, and each one of us has a different job. Certainly the job of my boss is to look at the big picture, and of course we are all on the same tune on that. But we have to do both things at the same time. I don't think that there is a problem of allocating political capital, if I may translate your point that way. as Wolfgang has said, migration pressures are certainly the biggest challenge, because it's not just about saving lives, which of course is the primary task. It's about putting these desperate people in conditions to say, maybe I can stay in my home country, which means that they need to have security, they need to have decent life perspectives and different jobs perspectives, decent jobs perspectives. This is the duty of Europe to do, of all of Europe. And this is a problem that must be solved through European means. In the meantime, since there is no European strategy, there are some countries, and my own country is certainly on the front line, which are producing gladly a service to Europe. We are producing a common European good, which is safe borders, including life savings. This is something that the whole of Europe benefits from. But let me come back to the technical points. I think we need to do both things. We need to have a big picture and have a big strategy on big issues, but we also have to fine-tune the existing rules. And you mentioned rightly the fact that we have been discussing potential output measurement for years, nothing comes out. Why is this? Well, because there are different views about how to improve the technical rules, but again, this is, to me, unfortunately, is a signal that we need to have more trust among ourselves. It's not about twisting the rules. It's about asking ourselves, we need rules, but we can improve rules. And I think that if we have a common view, a common goal in terms of improving the European integration project, we can do it.
Commissioner Moscovici, can I ask you to address Dr. Schäuble's remarks? It was the case that when asked in France why France is able to get waivers on the rules, his answer was because it is France. But I also, as the man in the room, not only as the European Commissioner for Economics, but also as a member of the Commission who has gone through this refugee crisis and the Ukraine crisis, are you at all disappointed that as someone who worked very hard on the President's report and is pushing for reforms, that it is getting sort of, distraction is the wrong word, but there hasn't been more progress on the kind of reforms that perhaps Dr. Padouan is discussing?
Je vais parler en français aussi, puisque comme il y a le...
I will be speaking French as well, given that I have the opportunity to do so. Given that Brexit is getting ready, I think that the French language should be spoken more. I will be speaking more English later on, but I guess that for now, French is quite a good choice. And I will not be going into a single dialogue with Wolfgang. I have a lot of friendship for him, and we know his provocative personality as well in order to provoke reflection. Three main remarks. First and foremost, on rules. We have built those rules, indeed, in order to make sure that we overcame the crisis, in order to limit public debt, in order to grant the seriousness of our public finances. But to me, there is no antagonism on being fiscally serious and looking for growth. The package, as we have it today, is not anymore this very stupid and simplistic package that we had at the beginning. It became a lot smarter, a lot more fine-tuned. We've been talking about flexibilities. I agree with Pierre Carlo. So many circumstances must be taken into account: structural reforms, investments, natural disasters, refugee crisis, and we should not forget that we also have to fight against terrorism, and this can launch new expenses. So those are changes, but we need to go even further. And I agree with Wolfgang when we are saying that we must not question the package. We should not question the package. We should not, in this period, go towards treaty changes. Now, very small adaptations, very concrete ones, must be carried out in order to make sure that the package is more readable and consistent. It is true, sometimes I go in a press conference, I explain a number of decisions, and I'm saying to the people, I do not understand them myself. But you know, we have so many technical details on the various structural reforms, etc., means that we are faced with an issue, something which is not readable, easy to communicate, easy to understand. Well, it means that something is not working. working. Then there is a second idea. We've been talking about the structural challenges and everything that is complicated on this, and I believe that on this we need to have an appreciation margin, an assessment margin, and thanks to the Slovak presidency we had a very good discussion during the last ECOFIN, and I am in favor of rules that are robust, solid, respected, and at the same time developments towards more readability, simplicity and consistency. Now, second remark. As a member of the Commission and not only as the Commissioner in charge of economic affairs and financial affairs, I will not be the one who will be questioning what the President is saying. By definition, I'm very disciplined in my way of expressing myself. But our President has one characteristic. He likes France. He loves France. And it's very true to say so. And what he said, I thought it was a signal of sympathy, but maybe also just a calling towards us. But when it comes to the decisions which were taken for France and for other countries, those were objective decisions. France and Michel respected the rules in 2014, in 2015, in 2016, in 2013, and I hope in 2017. And the deadlines were not any deadlines. It was because effective action had been undertaken, and therefore we were able to provide those deadlines. There is no discrimination whatsoever within the Commission, whatever the color of the country, its political family, or its size. We always have one compass, and that is rules, with flexibility, with smartness, but rules. If we lose this compass which are rules, then nothing will be happening. I'm always more in favor of promotion and maybe more flexibility than sanction. But if we have to sanction, then we ought to do so as well. So I believe that many things can be carried out within the rules. We should not go outside the rules, be it for a small or a big country. Then the very last remark, third one, and it will bring us to the debate we should have on the EMU. It goes without saying there is a lot to be done in order to face the populism. There is a major crisis, and security issues, geopolitical issues, democracy issues are first and foremost. This being said, we are not neglecting what is at the very core of the problem in Europe. That is to say, the future is the Eurozone. And right now, the Eurozone is going through divergences. Divergences when it comes to the economic situation between the large countries who are here. Divergences when it comes to public finances. Also when it comes to surplus or a current surplus. And a Eurozone that is creating divergence means that no one is adhering to it and taking ownership of it. So I'm supporting the Slovak efforts in order to think about the future of Europe. This is absolutely instrumental. If we are not able to think about the future of Euro and to move forward on this, we will not have more ownership of the European project, and we need to be extremely careful. Of course, we are in an electoral year, in Netherlands, France, Germany, and of course the opportunity window for decisions will come later. But let's not have a white year. We need to be ready between 2016 and 2017 to move forward in a determined way. This is the sense of what we were saying, and I will intervene later on in English as well.
Let me turn to you, Mr. Sapan, because I have headphones on already. So, but also because your country is being discussed here, if you care to address Dr. Schäuble's remarks, but also what Commissioner Moscovici also said, in that if you were to look at Europe today, I think people are most concerned about the rise of populism in France and Front National. And yes, it is true that Marine Le Pen has vaulted ahead because of the tragic events in Nice and the Bataclan, but she was doing pretty well before that, based on criticism of the Eurozone policymaking, of austerity. And I'm wondering whether this rules that we set up during the crisis is not hurting the efforts of mainstream parties in France to make an argument for Europe. Because again, it was not the terrorist attacks that brought Marine Le Pen to first place in the polls. It was austerity and economic stagnation that brought her to first place in the polls. Is that an unfair argument?
So I will answer in French, goes without saying, given that on this panel everyone understands French, and even Peter, he loves France so much that he's spending all his summer holidays in France. So just to say, France is France. France is a beautiful country, but I could say exactly the same for all the countries represented on this panel. And we know Slovakia very well now, given that Slovakia is chairing the council, and we appreciate Slovakia because it is Slovakia. It does not mean that we need to have different attitudes towards a large country or a smaller country. We're talking about large because of the size. Of course, we all have very large and great histories. After Pierre Moscovici, let me repeat something very clearly. There is not, and there cannot be, two ways of applying the rules. We can't have rules for some that will be applied very strictly, and rules for others, such as France, Spain, or Italy, where those rules would not be strictly applied. Rules are rules, point. And Michael knows it very well. I hear that Michael is actually smiling, laughing. No, rules are rules and ought to be respected. So I'm not coming back on this. Rules are smart, rules need to be developed, they need to be readable, understandable. When I'm speaking French, I'm never talking about potential growth or structural deficit, because those are words that no one understands. So we need to make sure that, of course, we take into account those ideas, but you can see that there is no two similar definitions when people are trying to define potential growth or structural challenges, etc. But let me come back on one thing. So I was saying rules need to be rules, they need to be smart, they need to be adapted if need be, but we should not change it. Otherwise, it would be feeding populism by bowing to arguments which are wrong arguments, which are easy arguments, demagogic arguments. And if it was not those arguments, then other arguments would probably be used. But what is happening right now? What is feeding the populism? Well, our Europe right now is faced with new challenges, and those new challenges are questioning security in a very broad sense. We were talking about terrorism that struck France, struck Germany, and that might strike any country in Europe, because they are striking democracy, they are striking our freedoms, because this is a mindset that is unbearable for those fanatics who are trying to impose their laws and to all the other countries and all the other faiths in the world. So this issue about security is instrumental, and this is not part of the rules. We do not have rules that are telling us that we ought to defend ourselves together. Of course, there is a call towards solidarity. In the treaty, we have references to this needed solidarity among our countries, but we do not have rules. So we ought to invent something. Wolfgang is right when he says that faced with those major challenges about terrorism, political instability at our borders or on the other side of the Mediterranean Sea, the movement of populations, and what we are calling the refugee crisis, we cannot answer alone. A country on its own cannot actually face all those issues. France can be a very strong military power. France is involved very strongly, but France is not able to do it alone. And when needed be, even a country like Germany, and we know the very difficult relationship between Germany and the military force, well, even Germany was present next to the French forces in order to, while respecting the constitutional rules in Germany. But this was one country and another country. No, what we need is to create a common capacity in order for us to be able to respond to those major challenges. So a common capacity is to respond to these major challenges. And this is what is coming right now. 2017, and I'm repeating the Commissioner, it cannot be a white year when it comes to reflection and proposals in order for us to deepen the EMU. It's too much of a topic for us to stop thinking about it and to stop proposing anything just because we have main elections. But it is not on those topics that we will fight populism. What we ought to do is to respond to the security concerns that are striking the spirits of our public opinions. So what are we doing? Well, we are starting to implement new modalities that are common modalities that are being created between governments in order for us to be efficient, a fund in order to support development in African countries, and this to avoid, or rather to decrease the people leaving their countries in order to look in Europe for more wealth, for instance. So we need to act at the very source. And what we need to do is to act together in order to stabilize in Syria or in Iraq populations that are just trying to save their lives. And obviously, they will be forced to leave their country for a while at least. So acting together, it also means that we ought to have the capacity to finally reflect on a common way of acting from a military point of view. I'm not talking about a European army, because up till when we will have a European army, we will have to wait a very long time, but we need to be able to act together at the European level, and this needs to be taken into account from a fiscal point of view as well. Now let me conclude. We are thinking about deepening the economic and monetary union. This is instrumental. We cannot be sharing the same euro, the same currency, and not have more deepening when it comes to budgetary harmonization, social harmonization. This is not possible. It is not sustainable. We've seen it. There are too many differences between the countries, and we have crises that could question the Eurozone. But right now, what is the best way to serve the deepening of the EMU? Well, it is answering to the very concrete questions, which are security issues, welcoming in good conditions refugee, protecting our borders. Suddenly we've discovered that we had common borders, as if we did not know it beforehand. We have external borders, which are common ones. How to protect them? Well, on this, we are creating a common task force, a common customs force, in order to help, from a maritime point of view, the protection of our borders. So it's very concrete, it's very pragmatic, in order to answer to the main concerns of our people in 2017.
It's a very interesting way of looking at it, that the way to secure the Eurozone is to deal with the security questions. I notice Minister Noonan laughing. He gets to laugh because he's meeting all his budget targets, so that makes it useful. Let me just have our host, Minister Kashmir, to wrap up. Before I turn to the audience, I just want to remind you, again, those of the audience will obviously have their microphones in the room, but also on the TATRA Summit app. I am actually now getting questions on my iPad, which I don't think is mine to take home. As the chairman of the presidency now of ECFIN, that is discussing all these issues, I guess I just would like you to wrap this up and perhaps give your views on this discussion. As you sit there and you try to move legislation through the process of the presidency, do you find that the pure economic and financial issues are difficult to get through? The topic of this forum, securing EMU at a time when so many other ministers and so many other governments are worried about issues of security, of migration, or do you find that actually we can't chew gum and walk at the same time?
First of all, I do hope that God save us, and in 2 months we will be quite successfully. We will just the stick can be taken by my Maltesian colleague Edward. Because at the beginning it was very quite dramatic after outcomes of British referendum, and now we see that the voters are more calm. Talking about the common business, just we spent 1 hour with Pierre as a partner, because Commission is an inevitable partner in this business, and there's a lot of work in front of us. And so in areas like taxation, because we didn't mention taxation, but for example, fight against the tax fraud now during the German presidency on G20, because it's always global issue. This is really, we did a lot in Europe, but thanks to global initiative and thanks to fact that the godfathers of the old system really understood that things must be changed, and I think that also the German presidency on G20 will continue with tax certainty, for example, as an issue which is very important for our business, how to resolve the disputes between the countries. I mean, double taxation, which are coming from double taxation treaties. Then the VAT package is on the way. The Pierre will come with the VAT package. Anti-money laundering, this is really issue. This is about the terrorism, about how to tackle the financing of terrorism, because there is a linkage between the tax fraud and financing of terrorism. Definitely it is. So And about the, for example, investments. So FSI number 2. So the second period of this successful story, I do hope that during the December action the Commission will come with the assessment of FSI 1, and I do hope that possibly together with Wolfgang and others we can just to bless this project for the second period with certain, again, adjustments, because this always can be better. I mean, these issues is about additionality, but also external mandate of EIB, for example. This is also the way how to address the problems raised by Michel. And this is about also, okay, we were very polite about this migration issue. You know, in this part of Europe, this is very sensitive. But what we thought, this is the protection of external borders. This is from the beginning. This is the issue which we targeted, you know, because these are our common borders, and the problems are coming from outside of this border. So, and definitely we will have to spend certain amounts to help the regimes, the states around the rear Europe. And deepening of EMU, this is our favorite issue, and so we just not to massage, you know, this issue, but we try to raise it, and we will come in December with progress report or with letter of presidency. So because all we know that changes are needed and that architecture must be completed. And this is mission possible, not impossible.
Thank you. And I was remiss not to mention the tax issues, because I know it's something Commissioner Moscovici has worked very hard on. There has been quite a lot of progress in the last 2 years on that. Let me turn to the audience. There are people with microphones. As usual with these kind of conferences, when you're called on, please state your name, what organization you're from, and if it's directed at a particular minister, please name that. I will also ask you, the organizers have asked me to please keep your questions short. There are other panels. We want to get everyone's questions in. So can I see a show of hands? And do I see the microphones back there? And the microphones, I guess, will come to you. Is there anyone who would like to start out? And also, let me just remind you, the TATRA Summit website and app, I already got a couple questions here, which I can go to as well if I don't see any questions from the audience. Right there in the back.
I'm Stefanie Wolzen. I'm correspondent for Die Welt. I have a question to the panel concerning Brexit, if I may. Yesterday, the UK government found an agreement with Nissan, which is one of the most important car manufacturers in the UK, on giving or helping Nissan to mitigate any effects of Brexit. There are no details yet, but this looks like a clear case of state aid. So do you think, because the UK in fact is still a member of the European Union, that the Commission should promptly take action against the UK? And also, do you think that these kind of measurements by the UK government actually make the negotiations more difficult?
Let me turn to, obviously, Commissioner Moscovici, because this is a question for the Commission. Again, the question from the audience was, yesterday, Britain, Nissan, which is one of the largest car manufacturers in Britain, announced it would stay, saying they had gotten assurances from the British government that Brexit would not harm them and that it would get similar trading relationship with the EU. The question is that something that I guess raises concerns amongst the Commission, because it does smell like the state stepping in and helping a company?
I'm not going to answer on this specific case, which I don't know precisely, but I would like to make some, I would say, quite logical remarks. First, there won't be any negotiation before the negotiation starts. Madam May already announced that Article 50 will be raised before or in March 2017. Until there, they are preparing their strategy. We are preparing also our capacity to negotiate, and the 3 institutions now have negotiators. Second, and it is very important for those matters, but also for commercial or trade matters, until the day the UK will leave the Union, the UK is a member of the Union. And we spoke about rules, all kinds of rules, not only the fiscal rules have to be respected by members of the European Union. And we have to deal with the UK as a respected and respectful partner. You mentioned tax issues. I proposed, in the name of the Commission, on Tuesday, a very important, significant reform expected by business and by a lot of stakeholders on common consolidated tax basis. We will start discussing that in the ECOFIN. It will take some time. It won't be an easy discussion, I know that, but it will be discussed with the British government. And I know that the British government wants to be active on those matters. So respected and respectful, and fully a member until the day, we'll see when it happens. Third, we'll see what will be the kind of approach that will be defined for the Brexit, and I don't want to use a word, tough, soft, etc., etc. That's not my point. My point that when the negotiation starts, we have principles to deal with. And those principles for the Union are the principles of the internal market. And I will just recall that the 4 freedoms of the internal market work together. But of course, at the end of the day, the British people decided, we can regret that, but we respect it, that Great Britain will be out of the EU, but Great Britain, the UK, will be a European country, very important for a lot of matters, security, defense, etc. And the closer our relation are with this country, very important member now, and tomorrow very important partner, the closest our relationship are, the better it is.
Can I ask Monsieur Sapin to address that question? Because Nissan is a company that owns Renault, and some of the speculation was that if Nissan did not build these cars in Britain, that they would move it to France. And I just wonder if you could address that specific issue of the audience member, but also, if I could also, is this an opportunity for Eurozone members to perhaps lure international, multinationals to the Eurozone? I'm thinking financial services in particular, but also manufacturing. Is Brexit an opportunity for France?
Eh bien, je ne dirais pas.
Well, I will not say any more on this file. I will not add anything to what the Commissioner said, because it would be taking a chance, given that I do not know everything about the file. I do not want to be saying anything stupid. I do it too often, so I'll try to avoid it today. However, when it comes to financial services, well, this is quite a peculiar question, given the position that those financial services are having in the United Kingdom, given the London marketplace. And also given that, because we belong to the Eurozone, we need to make sure for the safety of the Eurozone that we have rules that are common rules, but at the same time, we also need to have a capacity for us to manage a number of tools that are determining if we are to exchange in euros. Let me be more precise. The first marketplace for the exchange in euro is London. Right now, almost all the compensation chambers are in London. Compensation chambers in euros. So is this a sustainable position for after Brexit? I do not believe so, because be it a hard Brexit or a soft Brexit, this cannot go on after Brexit. Therefore, those who believe, and some do in Great Britain, so those who believe that after Brexit things can be just as they were before Brexit, they are making a major mistake. They're making a mistake towards the European people, the British people, because the British people asked for Brexit in order to have a change. So we have many building blocks in this change. We have consequences, but it goes without saying, when it comes to financial services, there will be consequences, because we as the Eurozone need to have a better control of it, especially when it comes to the euro compensation chambers. Now, are we to go into a war with Great Britain on financial services? Of course not. London will always be a major marketplace from a global viewpoint. We will have to keep working in a trustworthy way with the London marketplace. So of course we do not want to go into a fight. And I will be very honest with you. I don't think that many international banking institutions will be transferring their headquarters from London to Frankfurt, Amsterdam, Paris, or any other country. No, they won't. I don't think so. However, some of the activities will probably be transferred toward the Eurozone, towards the European Union, and especially the Eurozone. From this viewpoint, I believe that all of us are to develop the attractivity of our marketplaces, and we need to work in a cooperative way among our different marketplaces. We have very strong, very important and significant marketplaces for some financial products, other for other financial products. So between Frankfurt, Paris and Amsterdam, for instance, I believe that we need to cooperate together. Excuse me, I'm really sorry, I apologize, Piercarlo. We need to be working with Milan as well. Of course, it goes without saying, so we need to show many cooperation. So this is my view. So of course, things will change after Brexit. Of course, there will be many different changes. The Paris marketplace, yes, is a major marketplace with the capacity to attract many activities, but Paris is not on its own. It is inside the Eurozone territory, and Paris does not want to play on its own. I want to reiterate this today. In Europe, we cannot have a win-win strategy if it is not a cooperative strategy.
Minister Casimir, you wanted to weigh in on this?
Yes, on this Nissan case, it could be maybe even more complicated, because I've heard that traditional British automotive industry was not very pleased with this investment treaty between the British government and Nissan. Maybe you know, maybe not, but Jaguar Land Rover just signed investment treaty with Slovak government last year on investment £1.5 billion. So it could be the biggest factory out of British Islands. This treaty is just now assessed by Commission from the point of view of possible state aid. So at least equal treatment is needed. And who knows who will benefit from the Brexit then on that case.
Fair enough. Let me go to the iPad question, which I think they're going to throw up on the screen here. Here we go. Do you think there will be a new recession in Europe in 2017? Be honest. I'm going to pick the ends of the panel to address this, Commissioner Moscovici, because it is the job of the Commission to think about these things, particularly in the wake of Brexit, where we had quite a bit of economic disruption. But also, I hope you don't mind, Dr. Padoan, since your previous job was Chief Economist of the OECD, you probably are the leading economist on our panel, so I'm going to ask you that as well. But I ask Commissioner Moscovici to start with that.
I can be very brief about that. Honestly, there won't be a recession in Europe in 2017. There will be growth in Europe in 2017. The recovery is now ongoing for several years. The question is how important and how solid will be this recovery. What will be the economic consequences of the Brexit? We're going to deliver our forecast in a few days from now. But I see participating to G20 meetings, for example, that Europe is no more the problem of the world economy. We're not yet a solution. And this is why we must go on with adapted monetary policy, with fiscal policy, which is at the same time serious and growth-friendly, with structural reform. We don't see the end of structural reforms, and the process must be ongoing, even if we must now insist also on education, on innovation, on R&D, and for investment. And we spoke about the Juncker plan. Certainly we need to assess it, but I want to welcome the way the EIB handles it. And yes, there are new investment that wouldn't have taken place, and more risky behaviors now from the EIB, for example. And so we have a strategy, and this strategy must go on, must be strengthened, but no recession, growth going on. We need more growth and more jobs. That's our challenge, but no, we are not now facing a new catastrophe. Not at
Mr. Padawan, could I ask you that question? We've had an unexpected external shock. We've seen the ECB been forced to do some of the most unorthodox monetary policy that we've seen anywhere at any time. Any concern that we could be headed toward a difficult time in 2017?
One thing is difficult times, the other thing is a recession, which is an inversion of a trend. I would tend to say that there are downside risks to the forecast for 2017, which may include at the tail something deeper than just muddling through. But to me, the greatest risk of the European economy going forward is what I would call a muddling through situation, where there is no real acceleration of investment and job creation, which is what we need. So this is a typical case in which policy and political uncertainty are fundamental in determining what the medium-term projection will be for the next 3 to 5 years. And this is where we Europeans have a major responsibility as policymakers. We have to deliver a credible growth strategy, of which we have several ingredients, and what Pierre mentioned are certainly very important ingredients. Structural action. I would say structural reform at the national level, but also structural reform at the European level. Yeah. And it has a very simple name. Single market, a digital union, innovation union. I like to call this an innovation union. So we need to accelerate on that. If we don't accelerate on that, and one can think of other measures, the more attention to the composition of budget policies. Yes, of course, we have to respect the aggregate constraints, but then also ask, what do you do with public finance? How do you generate investment opportunities through the budget? If we don't do that, then the risk is, again, muddling through. And if we were in the United States at a debate like this, someone would have already raised their hand and said, is this secular stagnation? I'm not saying that. But, you know, they're similar to that. So this is the risk I see rather than recession.
And as someone who was being paid in euros until 5 months ago is now paid in pounds, I would say that the Eurozone is actually not the biggest threat to the European economy. I saw a gentleman right there, and then we'll wrap it up.
Josef Batra, professor of political science at Comenius University in Bratislava. Following up on the comment by Minister Padawan, now it seems that the Eurozone has been, in addressing its crisis, has been setting up structures that are set up outside of the treaty framework of the European Union, such as the ESM, which is an international organization with the seat in Luxembourg. I wonder, how is the Eurozone going to continue in its further operation? And there are some ideas on the table suggesting that the Eurozone should become a quasi-federation, including quasi-federal institutions like the Ministry of Finance, possibly a European Parliament, Eurozone Parliament, forgive me, and all sorts of other policies moving it towards a virtual federation. My question is, if this is where this is going, what is it going to do to the European Union?
Let me ask Minister Schäuble if you could address that, because this is something that you have talked about almost your entire career. Can there be a Eurozone core with the rest in orbit? And does that do anything into the cohesion of the rest of the EU?
First of all, you have to have in mind that the euro is the currency of the European Union. Some member states are allowed not yet to join the euro, but as soon as they deliver the preconditions, they have to join. Therefore, the euro and the monetary union is not dividing the European Union. The European currency union is the motor of dynamic to bring European Union forward. Of course, we are in a difficult situation because that's what I mentioned before. I think in the given situation, it's difficult to imagine that we get any amendment to the Lisbon Treaty, to the primary law, because you need an unanimous decision by 27 member states, actually 28, with national ratifications in some member states by referenda. And I wish you good luck. Maybe we'll have to ask the parliament, the regional parliament of Wallonia for this. Therefore, that is the reason I am very much in favor of the ideas you mentioned. That's my real philosophy. But I think for the time being, it is not really, we cannot say as long as we don't have these solutions, we will not continue to improve situation. And therefore I think let's think about how we can use, of course, something like an intergovernmental system, like the ESM, to develop a little bit more. By the way, even the Eurozone is partly intergovernmental, partly institutional, partly intergovernmental. Very, very strange construction on all this. I would be very much in favor to change all these things, but I'm realistic. It's in the foreseeable future. I don't think that we will get it. Same when we have to fight migration. Same when we have to fight the security issue. We have to do it. We have to improve Europe, to strengthen the efficiency of Europe with the instruments we have. They are by far not the best one, but they are better than any realistic alternative, and therefore we should use the given instruments to improve the situation.
Before I get to our last question, I've been asked, we've been very active on social media, so I've been asked to put up on our screen here some of the comments that are made on social media, on Twitter and on Facebook. I guess we'll just put them up one by one. Okay, they're coming up. We only have time for one last question. We have to cut this a little bit short. I saw one other question in the audience, or am I mistaken? Did we have one more? Yes, right over here.
Franz Nauschnick, Austrian Central Bank. My question is rules. You were talking about rules and flexibility of rules, especially for deficit, stability and growth pact. What we did in Austria, we used the flexibility of a stability and growth pact. For example, we had the ASFINAG investing in infrastructure. It was outside the budget. So we doubled investment in infrastructure during the crisis. And now in Germany, you're also creating some sort of similar to ASFINAG, the Bundesfernstraßengesellschaft. Do you think you will use it also to bring infrastructure investment in Germany up to?
Let me ask to address that question very quickly because we're running out of time, but also I will just go down the panel here to any other wrap-up questions because I think we're running out of time. I'm getting yelled at in my ear. So Mr. Padoan, addressing that question specifically or any other concluding remarks you have?
Well, I can pick up the flexibility story by saying that we have enjoyed flexibility because we have followed the rules of flexibility, mainly because of structural reform and what I would say a very important structural reform program which is being still ongoing, and also boosting public investment projects, which are two things that are needed for a growth strategy. So from that point of view, I think that's a good experiment of merging fiscal discipline with growth-enhancing measures.
Monsieur Sapin?
Well, if something did not come back to the pre-crisis level in Europe, it is the level of investments from a general point of view, private and public investments. It can vary from one country to another. In some countries, the public investments stayed at the same level, the private ones have decreased. In other countries, it's the other way around. The private ones maybe stayed at a good level, but the public investment decreased. So what we need is investment. When I'm talking about investment, it is investment in infrastructures, investment in new technologies. The digital industry will be a determining building blocks in order to boost growth, in order to improve our competitivity, in order for us to stay up with the other large continents in the world. And I could say the same when it comes to energy infrastructures, included in the framework of the necessary fight we need to carry out against global warming and in order to promote renewable energy. So we need investment. In order to face this, what do we need? Well, we need national strategies that might be based on a mix between private and public investment. This is called PPP, public-private partnerships. But we can also have European strategies, and this is the idea of the Juncker plan, the new fund that was created. So we need to make sure that we enhance this Juncker plan and that we make it sustainable, a long-term plan. So if I'm not mistaken, the investment is part of the Bratislava mindset, what was adopted by by the heads of states and government in Bratislava, where they believe that security, investment, growth and youth should be the drivers of Europe in 2017, and I perfectly agree with this viewpoint.
Thank you, sir. I apologize, but I've been told that we have to cut off here. The ministers have bilaterals they have to go to shortly after this. So first of all, can we please thank the ministers here and join me in a round of applause for all 5 of them. I am told that refreshments are available outside the lobby. Please, I want to remind you to be back in your seats in 45 minutes at 10 till 3 for the next session on the digital single market. Thank you very much.